What's up, everyone? Welcome to Molebron and Dragons. I'm your host, Molebron DaoLockStone. So today would have been another battle report because I did have a very cool and interesting session since the last one, but the DM is throwing a little bit of a hissy fit about it. He didn't even like my written job report, and so look, TFC's a big server, you're gonna run into some crybabies. So even though I love the adventure, I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. I did like the DM, more or less. He was solid. He was a little shaky on the rules, if I'm being honest, but hey, still a fun time. And it featured just a wicked tough adventure, a wicked tough combat that I was very, very worried. At one point, 2 of my 4-man team was unconscious, and it was just me and the healer up, and literally none of the enemies had been defeated yet. So yeah, I had to pull a real rabbit out of my hat with that one, which involved intimidation, and in fact led me to make some direct changes to my character build, because this adventure took me to 5th level. And so I thought I'd spend this video talking about the changes that I've made from the original Molebron DaoLockStone build, because I have deviated from that because of player preference and because of the rule set that I'm in. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So first of all, I wanted to point out that that's one of the reasons that I go into so much detail and explain all of my thinking in my builds, is so that you can deviate based on what you prefer and based on the rule set that you're in. And so that Molebron DaoLockStone build that I released was Pact of the Tome, and it used the Spike Growth Repelling Blast combo for levels 3 and 4. And personally, I wasn't into that. I wanted to get into summoning right away, so I decided to go with Pact of the Chain for levels 3 and 4. But I honestly was planning on going back to it at level 5, because that's when Phantom Steed comes online. And you may be aware that Phantom Steed is one of my favorite spells in the game. I think it's the best 3rd level spell in the game. And so I honestly thought I was going to go in that direction. But then the second element came into play, the specific rule set that I was playing with at that table, or in the Forged Concordance, which is a West March server. And it has a very structured rule set. And the thing about these builds is that I more or less have to pretend that there are no magic items, because it varies so widely from table to table that you can't depend on items in a 1 through 20 build for a video. But when you are actually playing these games, of course, you get magic items in Dungeons & Dragons. And so that has an impact, and in this case, it had enough impact for me to switch to Pact of the Chain for good, because it was very close between Tome and Chain anyway. But I ultimately decided Tome for that video. But for the Forged Concordance, not only was Chain more appropriate for my preferences, because it allowed me to play that Summoner playstyle at level 3 instead of level 5, but it's got a robust magic item system, and I have some element of control over which items that I get, and that means I can trick out my familiar. And that means he can be even more badass than he is already, and is going to be able to, extend his usefulness well into tier 2 and into tier 3. So yeah, that's why I decided to make those changes. I mean, I literally just added this Pyro Converger. Look at that thing, that's so amazing, with an imp, because it gives the imp something to do. One of the things I'm finding is that the way that I'm set up, if the imp beats me on initiative, it's literally got nothing to do in round 1 except the help action, which is often not very useful, because it requires my action and bonus action to proc his attacks. So if he beats me on initiative, I have nothing to do. Now with this Pyro Converger, it doesn't use an attack. So on his action, he can activate it and do pretty significant damage. Remember that a cone, when shot from above, becomes a diameter. So 10-foot cone becomes 10-foot diameter. Instead of getting 3 squares by going from above, you can get 4 squares, a 2x2 area, 46, save for half. That's pretty good. And of course, as an imp, it's not subject to the fire damage that you get from a malfunction. And because it's not an attack, it doesn't ruin its invisibility. Yeah, a lot of synergies. So that's the very first item that I've acquired, and it's an amazing one for my familiar, right? And so I have in mind all of these things that I want to get for it, And it's possible because of the rule set that I'm in. And so, yeah, feel free to modify these builds, make them better for you or to make them better for your table. So I wanted to go over more specifically about some of the changes that I've made and some of the performance of the build so far, and really, take a deep look at this. So the first thing I want to talk about is my armor class. AC 14 is not high, and that was probably the biggest criticism that the Molebron DaoLockStone build got, especially from other optimizers, was that the AC was far too low and that this guy would never survive. And I thought, well, that just means I don't understand the playstyle that I'm going for here, because I think that's going to be fine, right? But, I had to play it to see, and 14 sessions later, I realized, yeah, I was totally right. Nothing to worry about. I haven't taken a point of damage in like 5 sessions or something, and I don't anticipate taking any damage anytime soon, because remember, this is a Summoner plus Ultimate Defense Caster build. And I've now got 3 layers of ultimate defenses, and if one doesn't work, the next one will, and if that one doesn't work, the third one will probably work, right? So, yeah, and I'm getting another one at next level, so it's like, yeah, I don't take any damage, ever, and my AC is never a concern. So that was fine. In fact, I was actually thinking, God, if I got magical studded leather, I'd probably just sell it. Like, the gold is way more valuable to me in this rule set than it is, than an additional +1 AC that never comes into play. So there's that. I wanted to talk about my invocations, because I've got some crazy ones, right? You can see that I've got Investment of the Chainmaster, which of course has been doing a lot of work for me. But I now have Voice of the Chainmaster and Cloak of Flies, which I've reskinned as Lava Cloak. This was a bit of a departure. In fact, I actually didn't myself make those changes. I was planning on going in a different direction. I wanted to keep Agonizing Blast, and because of that, I wanted to do Double Sight. But I woke up like 15 minutes before I was supposed to play this character for the first time. Just my gut was telling me, no, I wanted to go with Voice of the Chainmaster and Cloak of Flies. And so let me explain. Voice of the Chainmaster it was because I just didn't feel right constantly having to measure out the 100-foot distance for telepathy, because it actually makes a difference in a lot of these cases, particularly when my first line of ultimate defense is that I ride a horse, and my first action is typically to ride 120 feet off the map. And once you do that, your enemies don't really pay any attention to you, and I'm able to operate through Fargar, and I was having to constantly measure out that distance, and it was annoying, and it just felt beneath me, and so I just really wanted Voice of the Chainmaster. There was also the fact that if I am ever in a position where I need to solo a mission that has killed the rest of my team, I'm going to want Voice of the Chainmaster so that I can do it with, from my couch and not ever be in danger. And I'll talk a little bit more about that strategy in a little bit. But that's why I added Voice of the Chainmaster. I just, I just didn't want to ever deal with that issue and, have that unlimited range. And then I added Cloak of Flies, and this is probably the biggest curveball. And this was something that it took me a while to clue into. But the fact is that out of my 14 sessions, I haven't been pushing it, but 3 times Intimidation has saved my ass, or at least twice, and once it had a significant impact. So the first time was when I was fighting a bunch of Darklings, and we blew up their Dryad leader, and then I commanded the others to surrender. And they did. And I feel like we probably would have been able to kill them anyway, but you never know. And it was just an easy way to end the battle with a word. And I was like, oh, that was cool. And then a few sessions after that, I had a very difficult battle with 3 warlocks. And they blew away my familiar, and they blew away the familiar of the warlock that I was with, also an imp, and did a lot of damage, and it was a very difficult battle. And then we had to go fight 3 more of them, plus the BBEG, without our imps. And so I was feeling super naked and vulnerable out there. No offense, almost no defense, with a 14 AC and a darkness spell. And I made an intimidation play that literally wiped all 3 of those warlocks off the board. I made an epic roll. And that was an eye-opener. That could have easily gotten real sketchy. And then in the most recent battle that took place in this adventure that I'm not telling you about, where two of my colleagues were unconscious, and it was me and the healer versus 6 bad guys who were quite intimidating themselves because they had weapons that were just really, really like very bad weapons. And intimidation swung that for us. It got one guy to run away, and it imposed I think the frightened effect condition on the rest of them, and that allowed us to flip that battle. And so I decided to go with Cloak of Flies and lean into this. I mean, I'm not the sort of guy where a certain tactic wins 3 out of 14 scenarios for me and not acknowledge that. And so I'm going to lean into it. And I'm going to do this Cloak of Flies. I've reskinned it as Lava Cloak to give it a really awesome visual. And I now have advantage on intimidation, and I'm also going to get expertise in it when I hit 8th level and add Skill Expert. So I'm going to be quite intimidating, and I'm going to be using it because it's something that doesn't really show up when you're doing DPR calculations on a 1 through 20 build, but in this server, at this table and in this rule set, intimidation is actually really useful. And I'm as surprised as anyone. I wasn't expecting it. This is something that I've observed in the games that I've played, and I'm rolling with it. I'm leaning into it. It's cool. It's great. It felt so good to wipe those 3 dangerous enemies off the board when I literally expected them to kill me. And I was just actually praying that I could absorb enough damage that the rest of my party didn't die, and then they could heal me. So yeah, that was why I went with Cloak of Flies. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about my spell selection. I currently have Protection from Evil and Good, and I have this because it's a great touch spell that I can cast through Fargar, and it gives me a great defense versus Charm and Fear. These are debilitating conditions, and even though I have a decent Wisdom save, this is Dungeons & Dragons, you can roll bad. And so I really appreciate having this kind of shutdown option in case I'm dealing with some kind of creature that inflicts those conditions. And I can cast it through Fargar, so I can, cast it on him when he's acting more or less independently of me. Then I also have Darkness, and this is one that I never intend to cast in combat. I've got better options, as I'll talk about in a minute. But it is imperative to my ultimate last-ditch effort of soloing a mission that's killed my teammates, right? And this is the tactic that I'm really happy with. Because I have Voice of the Chainmaster, there's no limit to the distance that Fargar can operate from me, and I can see through his senses, and I'm right there to micromanage the situation. And so if I'm in a scenario where I'm the only guy who escaped and the rest of my party got killed, I can fix it. I can just send Fargar in with a Stone of Darkness, 10-minute duration. He can put it in his pocket, turn invisible, stealth his way to the position of whatever enemies killed us, pull out that stone, and just go to work. And the plan is he just, attacks and kills as many as he can until he gets killed, and then I summon him again, and I send him in again. And he attacks again and kills maybe 1 or 2 more, and then he dies, and then I do it again. And then I do it again. And then I do it again. You see where I'm going with this? I can basically solo any mission by myself. So, if my party's dead, I want Darkness and Protection from Evil and Good so that I can pair it with Fargar and make him even more lethal. I also added Invisibility. Self-explanatory. It's great for stealthing and infiltrations and escapes and stuff. And I added Summon Shadow Spawn as my main offense. I agonize between this and Summon Undead. I think Summon Undead is a better individual combatant, but the allure of Dreadful Scream was just too much. It's such a good control option. 30-foot radius is massive in this game. It's like 100 and something squares. It's like 4 or 5 times bigger than a Fear spell. It just can hit so many enemies, and Fear is a good one because they can't approach you. And so that can really control the battlefield, and it's something that I can do every time I cast it. I just wanted to be able to do that. It's literally like a Fear spell, that you then can attack things with afterwards and soak up damage with and stuff. So I decided to go with Summon Shadow Spawn, and it's been very effective in the one battle that I've had with it so far. Really saved our asses in one of them, actually. So very happy with that decision. I also have Misty Step, self-explanatory, and Meld into Stone, which is my second ultimate defense option. So currently my first ultimate defense option is riding my horse and running off the screen. And if that doesn't work, I have Meld into Stone as my backup. And if that doesn't work, I have Bottled Respite as my third backup. And next level, I'm going to be adding Elemental Gift Fly. And that'll probably be like 2 or 3. But yeah, I'm an ultimate defense caster. So it's awesome to have Meld into Stone. I feel a lot safer when I have that in my back pocket. And finally, I added Magic Stone as a cantrip at level 4, even though I also have Eldritch Blast, because it's a touch spell. I can cast it through my familiar. That gives him a ranged option, and that's fantastic because the imp doesn't normally get a ranged option, and if he can't close the range and get close enough to someone to launch a melee attack, it's nice to have, some Magic Stones ready to go, and he can pop off a ranged attack and then close the range in the next round. So I just did a deep dive video on Magic Stone. Check it out. It's a great cantrip. And the last thing I want to mention is the feat that I picked up. Inspiring Leader. This is another one that I did not expect to take going in, but as a result of the games that I played, I was like, wow, this is just going to be so helpful. Because one, not only does it buff up my imp, and giving my imp all of those temporary hit points is great. He only starts with 10 hit points himself, but has a stack of resistances and immunities that means he doesn't often take a lot of damage. I'm usually just like knocking off 1 or 2 damage from this dude. So adding 7, currently 8, but 9, 10, it's going to scale as I level. Temporary hit points to my familiar is awesome. And adding it to your allies is awesome. Not only do they really appreciate it, but it has definitely come into play plenty of times where my guys are staggering around with, 8 or less hit points, or 8 or fewer hit points, I should say. And I'm aware that they would be unconscious right now if it weren't for that Inspiring Leader. And that happens a lot. So I'm very, very happy with this Inspiring Leader add. It's not a detriment that I didn't bump my Charisma, because this playstyle doesn't deal with Charisma very much. I am a summoner. I fight through my imp and I fight through my summons, and I don't cast Eldritch Blast. I don't even have Agonizing Blast. I mean, I can cast it. I guess I get Genie's Wrath on top of it. But it's not my thing. I'm not an Eldritch Blasty kind of warlock. I'm a you can't target me and my summons are wrecking you kind of warlock. So that is the review of my character as he stands right now at 5th level. He's got an imp with a Pyro Converger, Inspiring Leader, got Cloak of Lava Cloak, or Cloak of Flies, and Voice of the Chainmaster. Go with Investment of the Chainmaster, and I'm feeling pretty much invulnerable. I mean, what are people going to do? I'll just run away and do an ultimate defense thing. You can't kill me, and eventually you'll just see an imp in your face over and over and over until you're dead. So pretty happy with that. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron DaoLockStone. See you next time.